What happens when America's closest ally no longer feels secure depending on America? Why is Canada suddenly talking about economic independence, strategic autonomy, and reducing reliance on the United States? And is Donald Trump's aggressive trade, first politics quietly pushing Canada toward a completely new global direction? Before we begin, subscribe to Canada Now for balanced and in-depth coverage on Canada, geopolitics, and global affairs. For decades, Canada's relationship with the United States was considered one of the strongest economic partnerships in modern history. The border was not just a geographic line, it was the backbone of North American trade, industry, energy, and security. Canadian businesses relied on American consumers. Canadian factories depended on integrated supply chains. And politically, Ottawa largely believed that no matter which administration occupied the White House, the long-term relationship would remain stable. But under Donald Trump, that assumption began to crack. Trump's return to aggressive tariff politics, economic nationalism, and America First tactics has once again sent shockwaves through America's closest allies, and Canada may now be responding more openly than ever before. Prime Minister Mark Carney is no longer speaking like a leader managing a temporary disagreement with Washington. He is speaking like a leader preparing Canada for a world where the United States itself has fundamentally changed. In a recent national address, Carney warned Canadians that the country's traditional economic strengths, especially its deep dependence on the United States, have now become vulnerabilities. That is a remarkable statement coming from a Canadian Prime Minister, and it reflects something much bigger than trade. Trump's tactics have created growing uncertainty across global markets. Tariffs on steel, manufacturing pressure, threats against allies, and transactional diplomacy have forced countries like Canada, Germany, Japan, and even long-time NATO partners to rethink how much they can rely on Washington in the future. For Canada, the pressure feels especially personal. Trump has repeatedly used harsh rhetoric toward Canada, sometimes mocking the country's economy and even reviving comments about Canada becoming the 51st state. While many dismissed those remarks as political theater, inside Canada they triggered a deeper conversation about sovereignty, economic resilience, and national independence. Carney appears determined to answer that challenge directly. Rather than promising a quick return to the old status quo, he is telling Canadians that hope is not a strategy anymore. According to Carney, Canada must prepare for a more unstable and fragmented world, one where allies increasingly prioritize their own interests first. And ironically, that is exactly the kind of world Trump has been promoting. The result is that Canada is now accelerating efforts to diversify beyond the United States. Europe is becoming more important. ASEAN and Indo-Pacific partnerships are expanding. Canada is increasing defense spending, pushing industrial investment, strengthening energy infrastructure, and promoting domestic manufacturing capacity. The recent Airbus AirAsia agreement in Quebec became symbolic of this shift. While officially an aviation deal, it also represented Canada's broader strategy: build more at home, attract foreign investment, deepen ties outside America, and reduce vulnerability to U.S. political disruption. Current global events are only intensifying this transition. From tensions in the South China Sea to instability in global supply chains, from NATO defense debates to growing competition over energy and critical minerals, middle powers like Canada are increasingly realizing they cannot depend entirely on one dominant partner anymore, especially when that partner's policies can change dramatically every 4 years. Trump's style of leadership has accelerated that realization. His economic pressure tactics may strengthen his domestic political image in the United States, but internationally they are also pushing allies to quietly build alternatives. Canada's new language around economic sovereignty, trusted partnerships, and strategic resilience reflects exactly that. And Mark Carney, with his background as a central banker during multiple global crises, understands how quickly economic systems can fracture when uncertainty becomes permanent. That is why his speeches increasingly sound less like traditional Canadian diplomacy and more like long-term strategic preparation. At the same time, Carney is trying to balance realism with reassurance. He is not calling for hostility toward America. The United States remains Canada's largest trading partner and closest military ally. Millions of jobs still depend on cross-border integration. But Carney is clearly signaling that Canada can no longer afford to place all of its economic security in one basket, especially when Trump's political approach prioritizes leverage, tariffs, and pressure even against allies. And perhaps that is the biggest geopolitical story emerging right now. Not a sudden breakup between Canada and America, but a slow, strategic recalibration driven by uncertainty surrounding Trump's long-term vision for the United States and its allies. The real question now is this: if Trump returns with even more aggressive economic policies, how far will Canada go in reshaping its global alliances, trade relationships, and strategic priorities? Because for the first time in decades, Canada is openly preparing for a future where the United States may no longer be the stable foundation it once was. Subscribe to Canada Now for more deep, balanced, and engaging analysis on Canada, Trump, geopolitics, and the changing global order.